I wanted to kind of talk about something that, I don't know, you may have talked about a lot of times. Some churches talk about it a lot, others don't. And I've always been fascinated by good leadership in times of trouble. I'm always fascinated when someone is led by the Lord that can come in and change a church or change a business, and just, it's almost a turnaround situation. I think, how do they do that? How do they lead? And as I got older, I realized that you don't have to be a pastor, you don't have to be a CEO to be a leader. And I would make the case, and you can argue with me, everybody in this room is a leader. You lead your family, you influence your friends, you may be the pastor of a church, an elder of a church, you may be the child of an elder, the child of a pastor. You have influence where you lead. And the question is not if you are a leader, the question is, are you a good leader? And what does that look like in times of trouble? And I'll get even more specific. Did I turn this on? Nope. There we go. Is that better? All right, thumbs up. Thanks. Sometimes my voice projects and others are just happy not to hear me. I don't know which one it is here. But take it even further and say, how do you lead without influence? You don't have a position, you don't have influence, but you can be a leader. And to me, that's fascinating. And God calls us to lead well. God calls us to impact people for the gospel and for Him. So wherever you are in life, let me challenge you and say, you are an influencer. You are a leader. So what does a good leader look like in times of crisis, in times where things are out of control? And maybe you've been like that and had times in your life when you've been going, man, I have no idea what to do here. And just pray, God, help me to be wise, help me to discern. And I wanted to look at that today, at Paul when he was shipwrecked and when he was going on the boat ride, and he ended up being the main leader, someone completely without influence on a prisoner ship. But I thought, what is it like to be lost at sea and go through what they did? And I'll tell you a quick story. It's not nearly as dramatic as his, but I've been out on the sea twice, and I've been sick 2 times. And the one time we were to go salmon fishing out in the ocean, I thought, oh, great, I'm sure it's a big boat, right? I'm sure it's perfect. And we get there, and I look out, and there are these beautiful boats, and then I see ours. And it's a 12-foot wooden boat with an outboard motor on it. We got 3 people in it. And I'm like, this is not good. I was 11. So put yourself in your 11-year-old brain. And my 11-year-old brain said, this is not good. We get in and we start heading out over swells. If you've ever been in the ocean, you go through the swells, and I'm immediately sick, and then it starts to level out, and he's puttering straight out. And I thought, if I can just see the shoreline, I can swim in. That's no problem, right? 11-year-old mind. If I can just see the ocean, or if I can just see the land, I'm good. And soon the land disappeared. And I don't know if you've ever been out in the ocean, but you can't get any bearings whatsoever. And so, the guy's looking around, the captain, he's like, that's the first signal. And he goes, My dad says, do you know where you're going? Well, I did. And my dad said, well, do you have a compass? Because I didn't think I needed it today. Thought there'd be other boats out, and we just asked. So my 11-year-old mind is panicking at this point because I have no influence. I have nothing. But in my mind, what's going to happen? I'm lost. We find a boat, and the guy, he says, where is land? The guy in the boat says, go that way. Perfect. We start puttering this way. We're 6-7 miles out in the ocean. No land. We run into another boat. Same question. It's that way. Okay. We start puttering around. We were lost for hours. Finally, by God's grace, did we see it. But my little 11-year-old brain went through so many things. I made peace with God. I was saying, I'll never talk back to my parents again. Just get me through this. I didn't want to drown. I couldn't see land. All this stuff goes through and you start to panic. The good thing was my dad was a great leader, is a great leader. He knew what to say to me and how to say it that calmed me down. Even when the other guy was going, I don't know. My dad knew exactly what to say, and he was by no means a sea guy, but he knew how to lead in this situation. And we see that with Paul as he goes through the storm. If you've read, this is a brilliant story. I'm not going to read it all, but I want you to go back and read Acts 27, and it talks about what Paul is going through. And in a nutshell, he's on a prisoner ship, and they send him north and then west going to Rome. And you know what they want to do? They want to stay close to the land so they can see it. Because that's, who wants to go out in the middle of nowhere and get lost? So they are heading that way. And if you know the story, if you know it well, they run into trouble. They run into big trouble. And Paul, person without any influence, any leadership position, turns out to be the leader and navigates through this. How does he do it? How do you lead in times of crisis? In Acts 27, Paul is in a literal storm, but he doesn't panic. He leads. And we see 4 powerful traits of a courageous leader: share, see, set, and serve. If we can remember those, that'll help us get through. Let's walk through each one of them, and we see how Paul leads through times of crisis. The first one is he shares God's word. He shares God's word. In verse 22, it says, "Yet now I urge you to take heart, for there will be no life lost among you, but only of the ship." Okay, that's good news, bad news, isn't it? Right? No one's going to die, but the ship, it's gone. Imagine hearing that. And that's what you're gripping onto, is this boat. And Paul is saying, yeah, you're going to live, but the ship is gone. Verse 23 says, "For this very night there stood before me an angel of God, to whom I belong and whom I worship. And he said, 'Do not be afraid, Paul, you must stand before Caesar. And behold, God has granted you all those who sail with you.'" God says, I have a plan for you. You will be before Caesar. You will get there. Don't worry. You're going to go through a lot of trouble. But you are going to make it to Caesar, and everybody around you is going to be there. Take heart. That's the word of the Lord. 25 says, "So take heart, men." So he says, "Take heart, men, for I have faith in God that it will be exactly as I have been told." And then he throws in a little hook again. "But we must run aground on some island." Good news, bad news. You're going to live. The ship is toast. You're going to live, but you're going to run aground. How would you be in that situation? Honestly, I don't know how I would be. What would you take comfort in? Paul is very wise. He walks with the Lord. He takes comfort in knowing God's promises and knowing what God has said to him, and he shares that with others. This wasn't Paul speaking sweet nothings. This was Paul sharing something of substance, which is the Lord, and saying, trust me. Trust in the Lord in what he has said. Trust in his promises. Key point here is leaders, and I'm talking to everybody who's a leader. I see leaders out here. Leaders speak life. Leaders speak life. Paul reads people's emotions. He uses God's word to comfort and lead. Have you ever been led by a really great leader? They know what to say and when to say it and how to say it because they know you and they read you and they can see what needs to be said. A bad leader does just the opposite. You don't care. Do it. Paul's a great leader. He leads with God's word and he knows people. He knows what to say. Be a passionate pursuer of God's word and a passionate person who knows people. God's word and know people, and you'll be a great leader. The second is this. Paul sees what's ahead. Acts 27 through 32 says this. For the 14th night had come, and we were being driven across the Adriatic Sea. At about midnight, the sailors suspected that they were nearing land. Man, how would you feel? Get that sense like, we just may live. We may make it. So what do? Back in the day, you take fathoms and you drop it down to see how deep it is. And if it starts getting shallower and shallower, that means you're coming to land. And we see that in here. It says, so they took a sounding in a fathom and found 20 fathoms. And a little further, they took a sounding again and found 15 fathoms. It's 120 feet, and now it's 90 feet. And they're thinking, this is good, but you know what could happen? Let's keep reading. And fearing that they might run onto the rocks, they let down 4 anchors from the stern and prayed for day to come. So at night, they couldn't see anything. There was probably no stars. There's probably no moon. Again, I'm conjecture here. They couldn't see, but they knew they were getting closer to land. And they were fearing rocks. Ships hitting rocks, it can be a battle destroyer and the rocks win. And they knew that if they hit rocks, they were done. And as the sailors were seeking to escape from the ship and had lowered the ship's boat into the sea under pretense of laying out anchors from the bow, Paul said to the centurions and the soldiers, unless these men stay in the ships, you cannot be saved. So again, he's going back to what God said, which is everybody stay together. If you stay with the ship, you stay with Paul, you'll be good. Some of the staff started panicking, or the people on the boat started panicking and laying down the small boats to get away. And he said, no, don't do that. Then the soldiers cut away the ropes of the ship's boat to let it go. So they got rid of all the boats, all the little ones. Maybe there was just one. The key point of this is leaders see beyond the moment. They help others stay grounded in God's promises. Paul reminded everybody of what God said. Don't you remember what I said earlier? Don't panic, which is a very natural thing. Maybe you've been in a crisis before where your head just exploded. And there is someone comes by you and says, no. Think about this. Let's walk through this. See what God's word says. Let's talk through it. That's what good leaders do. That's what good leaders do. They rely on the Lord. Leaders see beyond the moment. They help others stay grounded in God's promises, even when escape looks tempting. I see an easy out. I see an easy out here. I'm going to take it. Like, no, that may not be the best way. And again, you know your life better than I do, but have there been times in your life when going through a crisis, you see an easy out and you go, I'm going that way. But it's not the best way. That's what Paul is saying. He's being a great leader. They see beyond the moment. They see what God has said. They were 2 weeks adrift, 500 miles off course, headed towards land, but rocks also. And it's interesting, as I as I look back at my life, and even right now, the people that I admire the most are people who have gone through storms and who are older and more mature. Because when things around me are going crazy and I talk with them, they're trusting the Lord. Or they themselves are going through a tough time and they're calm. I have a very good friend, he's a mentor of mine, who will say he abused his body physically growing up. And his body is a mess. He's late 70s and he can barely walk. And I'll ask him, how are you doing? And he'll say, my body or my morale? I say, your body. My body's terrible. He's got one lung. His diaphragm doesn't work. His feet are numb. His legs are going to get numb. He's going to be in a wheelchair. And this was an athlete. When I first saw him and met him, he was built like a V. And just this physical specimen. And his body is deteriorating. I say, okay, how's your morale? He goes, it's great. Let me tell you what I'm learning. Let me tell you what book I'm reading. Let me tell you what the Lord has shown me during this time. And he just lightens up and he just gets all excited for what God is doing. And I go, I want to be like that. I want to be so excited about what the Lord is doing. My body can be deteriorating and I can still look and go, God is so good. And he will say that. And he's constantly learning. He'll say, God is so good. That's a great leader. That's someone who's gone through trials and focuses in the right way, focuses on the Lord. 3 is this. Paul sets the example. Acts 27:33 through 38 says this. Listen for how he speaks. As the day was about to dawn, Paul urged them all to take some food, saying, today is the 14th day, and you have continued in suspense and without food, having taken nothing. How do you get when things are going sideways in your life? Some people don't eat. They just stop eating. I've seen people in bad jobs literally lose 40 to 50 pounds because they can't eat. And that's what was happening here. All the suspense, all the turmoil, and people were just not eating for 14 days. Therefore, I urge you to take some food. He's like, eat, for it will give you strength, and not a hair is to perish from your head of any of you. Again, what is he doing? He's going back to God's word and encouraging them through God's word. So we see these 4 traits. And I want to leave you with this. This is a quicker sermon tonight. I hope you don't mind. But there are 4 traits. Share God's word. I want you to be great leaders. I want to be a great leader. I want you to be a great leader. Remember these 4. Share God's word. See what's ahead. Set the example. And finally, serve others. Let me read that last one. Acts 28, 1 through 10 says this. After we brought safety through, we then learned that the island was called Malta. The native people showed us unusual kindness, for they kindled a fire and welcomed all of us, because it had begun to rain and it was cold. When Paul had gathered a bundle of sticks and put them in a fire, a viper came out because of the heat and fastened on his hand. Then the native people saw the creature hanging from his hand, and they said to one another, this man's toast. Maybe it doesn't quite put it that way, but that's what they said. No doubt this man is a murderer. Though he escaped from the sea, justice will not allow him to live. He's going to get what he's got coming to him. He's on a prisoner ship. God's getting him. Somebody's getting him. He made it this far, but no farther. He, however, shook off the creature into the fire and suffered no harm. They were waiting for him to swell up or suddenly fall down dead. But when they had waited a long time and saw no misfortune come to him, they changed their minds and said that he was a lowercase god. Now in the neighborhood of that place were lands belonging to the chief man of the island named Publius, who received us and entertained us hospitably for 3 days. It happened that the father of Publius lay sick with fever and dysentery. And Paul visited him and prayed and put his hands on him and healed him. And when this had taken place, the rest of the people on the island who had diseases also came and were cured. They also honored us greatly. And when we were about to sail, they put a board wherever we needed. They put it on board whatever we needed. So the idea is Paul is actively serving others. That's what leaders do. Leaders serve others. Paul is a great example of that. Paul saw what was needed. He had the ability to pray and to heal, and he used it. God has given you a gift. Everyone who sits in this building tonight has gifts beyond belief to serve others. Have you ever been served by someone? How'd you feel? What did that say about the other person? Wouldn't you like to be that person that serves others? That is a great leader. Paul served and healed. Leaders don't wait to be asked. They know God's word, they know how to use it, they encourage people, they serve people. They don't wait to be asked. They step up, they show up, and serve. Even when they're hurting too. We challenge everyone in here. You are a leader in your own special way. Lead your family well, lead your friend group well, lead your wife well, your husband, influence in a godly way. And follow those things. And Paul gives a great example.
Thank you for listening to our sermon. We hope and pray that our sermons encourage you in your Christian sojourn under the sun. If you'd like to know more about our church, please visit our webpage, urcbelgrade.com, to find out more information. You can also use our sermon archive or contact form on our webpage, urcbelgrade.com. We would love to see you sojourning and fellowshipping with us each Sunday. Until we meet again, may the Lord's blessing and peace be upon you.